The plan for today's documentation hour has changed a little bit. It was originally going to be one of the engineering directors here at Canonical talking about how they've successfully created a culture of documentation in their teams. We've had to postpone that for hopefully just a few weeks, and we'll be able to do it in the future. And we always have like a backup plan for times like this, where we've got a document with questions and we'd like to ask each other as technical authors. I think if you've seen a couple of these, we've done these a few times before when we've had to make last minute changes, and we have got quite a few good questions we'd like to ask. However, I was just in a meeting with a couple of other technical authors before this, and they've convinced me to try and do something else. So I'm actually going to go on holiday for a couple of weeks after this, and so there's been a lot of things I've needed to finish. And I haven't finished. One of these things is a blog post that I've still got to write, mostly about the Ubuntu Summit logo. So the Ubuntu Summit is an event that Canonical puts on every year. The last couple of years it's been in a European city. It was in Riga last year, and it was in Prague the year before. And each year we design a logo that kind of encompasses the location that we're having the event at, and also we try and put the spirit of Ubuntu into the logo design, and try to reflect something more than just like a geographical location, all of that in a logo. So we start this process off typically quite early. And of course, professional designers do this, but the last couple of years we've been it's been difficult to get started knowing where to actually go. And by luck, I want to say, or by mistake, I've ended up having a hand in the design of the logo both times. Last year with the Riga logo, and this year, which means that I end up having to write the logo announcement blog post, and I have to do it by the end of today. So what I thought we'd try, I've made a start on it literally in the last half an hour. I thought, I don't know if this is going to work, but I thought I'd share the document that I've got, talk a little bit about how I'm trying to write the blog post. I don't even know the right way of positioning a blog post. I've written a lot of blog posts, but a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about how they should be written, the tone. And so kind of an open invitation. I'll even share the link, and you can leave comments to this inside the document if you like. And we'll see how this goes if we try and pair program writing the blog post, because it not only might it be an interesting kind of experiment for the office hours, it also means that I get help writing the blog post that I have to finish by the end of today. So I'll share the link to it. It should be, I think it's got commenting rights in it, so, and I'll share my screen as well, and then I'll talk a little bit. Maybe I should show. So we did a blog post about the same thing last year, and I actually wrote most of the blog post last year. It was published by somebody else, and you can see that this year I haven't started with the new logo proposal at all, which is what I suggested we do last year. Here is last year's, for example, with far too big version of the logo in the blog post. And then basically this is last year's, talking about Riga and what we were trying to build into the logo. A look at the previous logo that we used. So this bridge here is from Prague. It's long. There's a couple of quotes here. There's a quote from Marcus Haslam, who's the head of design at Canonical, on what they were trying to think. At the bottom here, this is where I got involved by doing a sketch of the top of the Liberty Monument, and then we got a professional designer in to do the final thing, which you see at the top. So that was last year's approach. I didn't want to do exactly the same thing this year. It wasn't. Oh, was it? Oh, yeah, maybe it was. I didn't actually notice. Maybe I do remember now. I did. I mean, I still, even though it was professionally designed, I didn't like the way the top star was squashed on the top of the logo. It's really difficult and so subjective. I really like the isometric designs of the bridge in Prague, and I think the Liberty Monument worked quite well, but the shadows are inconsistent. So I've not gone with revealing the logo in the beginning. So you've got. Let me know what you think, because I don't know how this is going to work. I've just written this out, for example, and I can tell you the bits that I find difficult. Last year, we called it "Reaching for the Stars," which is, it's too alliterative. I like directness in things. So, announcing the Ubuntu Summit logo would be my suggested title for this. I don't know what everybody else thinks, whether it should be some kind of clever pun or something that isn't directly related to the work that we're actually doing. So I've just started with the facts, and I actually suffer a bit too much from always wanting to keep to the facts. But basically, I've also done in text the equivalent of what I've done to all of you, which is try and create this setting for what it is that we're about to proclaim in terms of what the new logo design is, because you've got to assume this is the Ubuntu blog. Most people aren't probably going to know much about the summit, nor the fact that we put much thought into the logo. So really, that's what the first couple of challenges are about, and the first couple of paragraphs are about. Here, we do start planning the logo very early. Actually, we started in January, but nothing actually changed until June. We didn't really have any even initial sketches. So I actually ended up doing a sketch of what I thought it should be, just to get things moving. And so after covering the Prague logo and then the Riga logo, I actually, these are my sketches that I proposed to the team. I'm also uncomfortable making this about me, because I don't actually say this is me, but it is a team effort, just so that everybody knows. So then the blog post, I thought we tried doing the Peace Tower, which is the one in the middle, which is the part of International Court of Human Rights, which is really important part of The Hague. I can't remember this one. It's part of the oldest Houses of Parliament, I think, in The Hague. So I'm kind of discussing what I wanted to say in the blog post now, and also we tried the idea of a windmill, which is obviously kind of synonymous with the Netherlands and Holland and tulips. But what I wanted to, our thought process in trying to create the logo was, unfortunately, these buildings, what I want to say in a nice way is these buildings aren't distinctive enough or recognizable enough, or perhaps too complex. And we felt that the windmill was too much of a cliche. And so I did a little bit of research, and I'm actually talking about the logo more than the blog post, but the stork here is part of the coat of arms in The Hague. And it's also a symbol of, it's a symbol of how people come together. This is what the city uses it for. It's also informal. It's not an official symbol of it, which I like. So that was my final sketch, and that's kind of the logo design that we've gone for. I've not pasted the final logo in here yet, because I've basically not got to that stage. But that's what I'm trying to communicate in the blog post. So I don't think it should be long. Like last year, it was far too long. So we've got a couple of paragraphs introducing it, then introducing the idea of the logos themselves. Then I don't want to be negative, but then I thought it'd be interesting to provide a bit of thought on why we discounted some of these ideas, and why we ended up ultimately with something that breaks the chain of using architecture. And that's where I'm at. So we first tried, I don't know if this is going to work. What does everyone think of this approach? Do you think I should put the logo first? I mean, that's something that I thought last year, and I've since changed my mind. Yeah, Sally, just go for it. Sorry, Julia. Julia, you go first.
No. Sally goes first. I forgot to raise my hand.
It's fine, honestly. Please go.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think it's nice that you show the logo only at the end of the post. There's this kind of innuendo that gives you insight on the process of thinking about a logo. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, that's great. And that's actually really valuable, because often you write these things in total isolation, and of course you kind of share it with people and ask for feedback, but it's different when you're actually writing it. Okay. I mean, I don't know if I've got access to the final logo, but basically it's a much better version of this. Yes, Sally, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so I think in general, you want to try and keep a bit of intrigue in a blog post. And so I think saving the logo reveal until the end makes a lot of sense, if you think about what a blog post is supposed to do. And I actually really like having like the discounted versions and the explanation of why they were considered and then discounted. It kind of shows a little bit of the development process as well, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, so basically the kind of explanation that I just gave you about why we felt they didn't work, I should put that into words. I don't feel like I should do it now because it's going to be too slow, but I'll make a note. How has anybody got any ideas about how formal or informal blog posts should be? And does anybody actually read blog posts? I mean, I know the stats on them, and the stats say that people do read them, but I think I don't know. It seems in the age of very short attention spans and people used to very few words. Yes, Julia.
Yeah, well, I'm one who reads blog posts, enjoys blog posts. I think the tone should be informal and, as Sally said, a bit of intrigue to keep the reader interested. I think, maybe I might be wrong on this, but I think blogs are making a comeback. I mean, there was a bit of a boom in the 2010s or whatever it's called, and then they went down a little. But I think now people are discovering how nice a blog can be, because it allows you to have like a more long form kind of content instead of the quick tweets or social media posts. I think it's nice to, not make it too long, but to provide some context and like a reading experience.
Oh, thanks. I'm surprised that newsletters are popular, and I think it's maybe similar. People quite like the well-crafted, curated content, and for the same reason delivered in a way that they can. There's longer form, I suppose. Yes, Ruth.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say I read blog posts, but I skim through them. So I think it's more like opening them and trying to figure out what is in there without reading it all. So my advice would be to keep it short. And of course, here we have the challenge with the images, because the images is what draws the attention. So I would probably read the first sentence, then the sentence before the first set of images, and like everything else, I would just skim through, most likely.
But do you think we should have like a subheading here on so that you can kind of skip to the previous designs or something, previous
I think that could help, yes.
I agree, and I think this is quite complicated. It's a difficult idea to communicate. That I think when you're writing documentation and you have to accommodate all kinds of different abilities in how people are reading, one of the ways that you do it is in your language and the structure of what you write, so that people who know how to navigate what you're writing and skip to the parts that they're interested in. And it's difficult to be sensitive of that while you're also writing for people who may be genuinely interested from the first word and not have too much context. I saw a hand up there that's gone down now. Was that you, Dan? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had dropped it because my dog started barking, but he's quiet now.
No worry at all. Welcome to the conversation. I'm sorry it's all a little bit confusing this time.
So I think, yes, people read blogs. You know, the people in the audience of Canonical probably are reading very technical blogs and not marketing blogs, and socially relevant blogs, and I think this is right. I mean, I like the logo you chose for the reason you chose it. I love architecture, but bringing people together is more important. And, and that's what Ubuntu is all about, I think.
Make sure I'll put another note to make sure I mention. This is the kind of thing I forget, especially when you're working to a deadline. You have the ideas, and unless I make a personal note of them, they often get lost. And then I'm like, make sure you mention.
The trick is to remember to remove the personal notes.
Yeah. I used to work in magazines, and I guess a lot of people see that personal notes and things. You in the actual live copy, you'd put a load of X's, and because and you became so good at noticing X's in copy, and knowing that things needed to be changed. But it still got through. There are still covers that I was responsible for with X's as captions to things.
And unveil to remind me to remove anything with a capital note.
yeah. Or the lorem ipsum, or the that's the worst actually, because it looks all right if you're looking at it from a distance, so you don't know. There's certainly been some reviews that have gone out with that in it. So Bill's I'll read a couple of the comments. Sally said, I wonder how much the resurgence of blog posts and newsletters coincides with increasing people abandoning smartphones. I think people discovered how shallow social media consumable posts and video shorts can be after the initial honeymoon phase. And Bill's saying there's also a push for digital minimalism, spearheaded by a computer science professor of all people. I mean, maybe this is a bit off topic, but I actually know quite a few people who are deeply technical who don't allow their children to have access to screens or social media, even when they're quite old. And you know, I haven't been that strong with my own children, but I do totally understand. Dan says it's probably more complicated than that. I read them mostly on my smartphone. I think the competition for blogs in terms of the time it takes to consume them is less tweets and more video. I think people are pretty tired of the fixed pace of videos compared to reading a blog post, where the pace is then set by the reader and the signal to noise ratio is often much better. We do have a problem at Canonical and probably in other places where blog posts are written about products and specifically features in products that then become the canonical reference documentation for that feature or for that product. And it's like an ongoing battle sometimes to make sure that those features are first documented in the product documentation and ideally referenced from the blog post to the product documentation, rather than the blog posts becoming the search engine optimized version of the documentation for that feature. And it's still a problem that we have. I mean, some of the best hacks that we've got, and you can see this even in newspapers, is that this article is over a year old and you need to go somewhere else for the news, but it's still a real problem. They're also temporal, which is they only exist within a certain place in time, which can be interesting depending on the style of blog it is. But it's a pity that they're kind of lost to the backlog of the blog roll.
I know every blogger wants to be Shakespeare or Thoreau or Robert Pirsig, but they're really just doing something temporal. They've got to accept that.
Yeah. Does anybody here keep a blog? No. Yeah, Julia.
I used to. I mean, I started blogging when it was in, like over 10 years ago, I guess. But then at some point I got tired of, putting my private words and thoughts into the public. But yeah, I think it was a nice experience overall, and I do miss blogging sometimes.
Yeah, I used to do it as well a little bit, and I kind of miss the I think some writers like to write a little bit every day or do something, force themselves to do that. And I think having a blog is a good way of forcing yourself to sit down and write something, especially when you're holding yourself accountable to some kind of audience. Yeah, Kitana.
Yeah, Julia took the words from my mouth. So it's the same. So I started blogging and I was very into it, like when I was right out of college, and it was the trend, but it became a chore. I mean, which didn't feel pleasant at all. So I have an on and off relationship. So I write once in a while, like even once a year, just when something strikes me. That's it.
Yeah. Hi, Sharon. Yeah, go for it.
I've actually always blogged for like over 10 years, but it increasingly became more technical and less frequent. So I do have it. I just don't write as often as when I was 19.
Wow. Are you brave enough to share the link to your blog?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe.
Okay, no pressure, no pressure. But feel free to do it. That sounds like quite a journey, though.
Yeah, I used to write my opinions, and as I grew older, I thought maybe people don't care about what I have to say, so I became more critical of myself, and then I stopped. But I write the technical stuff, which is less opinionated.
Do you think it made you a better writer?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It made me more confident in saying what I think, which I used to be really shy about before.
Yeah.
Still am, but better.
Yeah.
Does anybody know the history of how we got to a blog? John Carmack's original log file for the game he was writing.
No, I didn't know that.
John Carmack he had a .plan file, and he was writing the early days of the web. He was
You might
writing.
have to explain what a .plan file is, Bill.
Oh, so in Unix, a .plan file is where you can put like your name and address and phone number, room number, and a brief message about what you're working on right now. For example, I've gone to the doctor. It was the old bulletin board thing. And you could finger the person and it would bring up the contents of the plan file.
Sorry, when you
had-
say finger, you might have to explain that.
Finger is a Unix command. You put in finger, username, and it brings up the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Unix people love to pick weird names for commands. You also had a .project file, which could be, there was an option for finger that would go and find the .project file that listed all the projects you're currently working on and the state they were in. And then John started taking what was, I guess, his .project file, which was also part of his .plan file. He didn't have them segmented. He started posting that on the web because people kept asking him questions. They knew he was a lead developer on Doom, I think it was. And they started posting it, and then all of a sudden, he's like, oh, I'm just going to have to keep this up. And he kept it up for years and years and years. You can find it out there on the web. And then at some point, everybody started blogging, and then it went from just logging, which is supposed to be web log, just like a journal, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody went to, let me just throw my opinion in here. And then the influencers got involved. Oh, let's talk about this deodorant, or let me casually mention this green stuff I'm stirring into my water, which is all you see now on the YouTube shorts. People stirring bloom into their water while they're telling silly jokes. So it became an advertising thing, and then it became we want to influence you with our thoughts. So we're going to act like we're just sitting here in our room just thinking about stuff. But in reality, this is a carefully crafted, carefully planned ploy to get you to believe what we believe and do what we want you to do. So like most things, it gets overtaken by foolishness. But originally it was just literally a journal of things he was doing every day.
I never realized he was responsible for that, along with so much else.
Yeah.
A couple of comments. Andrea's actually said that they learned HTML around the age of 14 so they could blog about bands they liked on Blogspot.
Not to be misleading, but that HTML amounted to adding like sparkles in the occasional place and some basic formatting. But yeah, it was a really motivational project because it's what you care about.
GeoCities. Sorry, Andrea.
No, that's it. What was the last thing you said?
Oh, it sounded like. Does anybody remember GeoCities, which was like
yeah.
It was always so primal colors and flashing and animated GIFs or GIFs.
Yeah. The flashier, the better.
So did you have a GeoCities website?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
I did for the longest time. I couldn't figure out what to put on it. But I took great care in selecting just the right city.
I'm going to try and find it in the web archive now. I did have a very embarrassing website very early on. Actually, that is on the web archive, which I'm not going to tell anyone about, but it is still there. But maybe that fits into the very early messing with HTML and trying to communicate in some ways, and that was also about music. So weblog equals weblog. Yeah, I think that weblog. I mean, it is weblog, isn't it? And then I always thought blogroll was a pun in terms of the relationship it does have to bathroom tissue for Americans. Dan says, same, except luckily for me, I wrote my own blog software in PHP and self-hosted it, so my teenage ramblings are now gone from the internet. The interest in Linux infrastructure, of course, stuck around, and so is PHP as well. I wonder if I had some blog posts on MySpace. As someone who even uses the command line on his phone, GeoCities is too much scrolling baloney. That's from Bill. So I don't know if I can take this in this. It's been really valuable talking about the blog. I don't think I can kind of sit here and try and add to it while we're all in the call. I feel kind of somewhat responsible that everybody's there watching me add inane words and then delete them again, which is a lot of what my writing is. So I think maybe I'll stop with the blog post and maybe just to, yeah, that genuinely is. And I've said this before, maybe I will spend quite a long time writing just a couple of sentences and then realize that those sentences are completely unnecessary. A lot of writing, I think, is forgetting about what you've written and then looking at it with fresh eyes, like asking you all to look at it and then saying to yourself, I just don't need that. So I'm going to stop this because I don't want to bore everyone with the Ubuntu Summit blog post. But if anybody does have any comments, please leave them and I will incorporate them all and I'll make sure it's done before I go on holiday. So thank you. I will rely on our questions and answers document to ask some open questions to people. If there's anything anybody would like to ask any of us or ask each other, please ask. It's completely fine. There's quite a few technical authors from Canonical here, and we're all very honest and happy to talk about the things that we care about. So why did I choose the stalk? Basically, the buildings weren't working, and was just looking for other ideas, and in the coat of arms for the city, there is this stork that's become a bit of an unofficial symbol for The Hague, at least when I started to, at least according to Wikipedia. And I just tried sketching it, and it kind of worked. And we have the animal theme at Canonical. It kind of fitted with that, and it was a bit different, and it was quite good. It felt quite good, like in the way that I presented those ideas, showing the buildings and the architecture, and this is how we've been designing the logos. And then to say, but this year we don't have to do that. We can do something different. And that everybody kind of resonated with that idea and thought, yeah, that seems good. Yeah, maybe there are lots of storks in The Hague. So we have some questions. If anybody's prepared to answer these as technical authors, then please go ahead. I'll ask, and if anybody wants to ask a question of anybody else, please go ahead. We've got a shared document with some of these questions in, but I'm trying to find something maybe not too serious to start with. What's the most common grammatical error you keep making, if any? So I am always getting its and its wrong. And I know the difference between its and its, but my fingers work before my brain does. And I've often typed the wrong thing before I've even thought about what I'm going to type. And I don't realize until I've sent the email or published the article that that's there. Julia says that's one of my pet peeves. It's really one of my pet peeves as well, but I'm probably responsible for more mistaken its than anybody else.
I think if there's a grammar god at the end of your life, I'm going to get asked questions about what does the mean. Really common mistake to type the twice. I'm
Yeah.
writing something and I get to the and I don't like the word I chose. So I think, I'll use this other word, and then I type the again because I forgot that I already typed it. And then it goes to press and people are, why are you doing this?
Related to that, there's a band in the UK from the 80s actually called The. And interestingly, there's the lead kind of artist in the band is a person called Matt Johnson, and there's an interview with him in the Guardian newspaper today. And you'd think that if you're interviewing the lead singer of a band called The, you'd get all of your auto-correction working for all the duplicates of the. And yet, sure enough, at least when I read the article earlier on, they got the title of the band wrong in almost every single instance that they wrote The. They would do, it was lowercase t, THE, and then capital The. I guess they created the band a long time before the internet, or they had to worry about how searchable something was. But I imagine there's an exception in code in Spotify and all of those music platforms and all of the music catalog databases that is specifically for the band called The.
I forget to put in knots. If a statement has got a knot in it, I forget to type it, and it gives the exact opposite meaning, and I've been in trouble quite a few times because of that.
I guess you're very positive.
So Sally, you could have written the book Eats, Shoots, and Leaves.
Oh, don't even get me started on the Oxford comma.
So actually, Sally, one of your questions is, what's your stance on the Oxford comma?
I'm not going to answer that question. You can prize the Oxford comma from my cold dead hands.
You support the use of the Oxford comma.
I love it.
Sorry, Robert. Did that sound like Robert? I didn't hear.
It was
sorry,
Robert.
I didn't want to jump in, Sally. I was just agreeing. Yeah, you can pry the Oxford, Cambridge, and Cyril comma out of my cold dead hands.
Do you always use it?
Yes, I do. I mean, I don't use it in documentation for Canonical because our style guide says otherwise. But in an act of a futile yet satisfying revenge, I use it in all the internal writing for Canonical, as well as on, in internal chats and emails and everywhere that's not customer facing or user facing. I take care to use it very diligently.
Yeah. It is part of our style guide to not use it, and I don't know. Maybe we should have a discussion about this sometime. I don't have personally. I'm not the arbiter of these things, but I do sometimes still add it because you cannot pass a sentence, I think, sometimes without it. So
I mean, is there an advantage to not using it?
I suspect it's more that there's this kind of, it's not a rule, it's more like a perception that there's a rule in British English that you can't use or that you shouldn't use the Oxford comma, but it's actually not forbidden. It's just customary to not use it, I think. It's more common in US English. And so people think, oh, well, you can't use the Oxford comma in UK English then, which is ironic considering it's called the Oxford comma.
And it turns out that actually failing to use it ended up getting some milk delivery man, $20 million payout in a lawsuit because his duties did not use the Oxford comma where they were supposed to. And there was stuff he was supposed to do after hours and not get paid overtime for, but they didn't comma. And so therefore it was lumped in with other stuff, and he was asking for back wages, and the company was like, that's nonsense. See, it says right here. And the lawyer said, no, it says these two things are grouped together. They both get paid overtime. So not only did they have to pay him all the back pay, they ended up paying him like $20 million. So there's now a retired milkman that loves the Oxford comma, I'm quite sure.
it sounds like we should call ourselves the Secret Oxford Comma Society because all the comments seem to be in support for it. Dan says Oxford comma is absolutely correct, and there should be 2 spaces between sentences. Kitana says I had to retrain myself hard to drop the Oxford comma when I joined Canonical. And Dan then says I rarely make any grammatical mistakes, or at least my writing style is intentional, but I would have a hard time writing an article about a band like Tete because I type too fast to mix those letters up. Yeah. Robert asked about when is it bad, and the only thing I can think of is that sometimes adds a momentary gap in, I suppose, a nanosecond of extra passing. Off the top of my head, that's the only thing I can think of.
That's kind of weird. So to flip the question, is there any actual advantage to not using it? Like, is there a case where you must not use the serial comma, otherwise the text would be misinterpreted? Because I don't know of any such case.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Socks. The secret.
Technically, it's easy to get it out of hand. So I like, let me come up with a sentence. I like baling hay. And I like baling hay, cream, and manure. And if you don't put the comma between the cream after the cream, it sounds like you're making a dish out of the 2 things, which would be a little bit ludicrous. So yes, there are situations where it can be unclear if you don't do it. But I think the push to get rid of it actually is less ink. Back in the 80s, the publishers were pushing to get rid of a bunch of things that caused them to have to print more ink, literally. Extra commas is more ink. Double dashes instead of a single dash. That the M dash went away in favor of the N dash. Anything that could save money. So that's just my interpretation. I was around in the publishing industry in the 80s, and there was a huge push to make things short, more compact. Oh, and getting rid of the extra space was important back then too, because it saved paper.
Dimolola says, I think it's one of those grammar rules that doesn't have any specific effect apart from deciding to use or not use at all to maintain consistency. And then Jared has said, just Googled the case against serial commas. Here's an example. We saw the singer Jack and Jill. That's a good example. So if we saw the singer comma Jack comma and Jill, or we saw the singer comma Jack and Jill. That's a good example. Any sentence with a list that doesn't use the Oxford comma just looks wrong. And if I was reviewing someone's knowledge base article, I'd mark it as an error. I didn't know there was a push to remove it.
It wasn't a very successful push, to be honest.
It doesn't appear so. Yes, Dimple.
To me, the exact same statement, but it looks wrong to me. When there's a list and it ends with a comma and then an and, it just looks wrong.
So does that mean you're pro removing the Oxford comma?
Yep. I'm just not comfortable seeing it.
So you wrote our style guide then?
Maybe I did.
Is that the technical authors who have access to the questions document? I don't want to dominate it if anybody wants to ask any of those questions on there.
Oh, there's a document? Wow.
Yeah. It's the questions that we had in Madrid. I wanted to ask if anyone had any favorite pieces of documentation they wanted to share. That they not one of ours, or it could be one of ours, but things that have really impressed them in terms of how it's been done. I recently broke the screen on my Steam Deck, which is this thing, and bought a replacement screen from iFixit, which is a company that tries to provide official repairs for things, and also documents those repairs. So even them that's quite complicated. I'm trying to find the link to the screen, and so they sell screens, and they write this documentation to go alongside the repair. It's a lot of images and a lot of bullet lists, and I can't imagine the challenge of having to write. Anybody could buy those screens. No, they provide all of the components, and then they've got to write documentation that everyone can work on. Is the screen? I'll share my screen. It's probably a bit wide, but this just worked. It is just step by step, and I think that's probably the crux of it. It's also, I mean, we've talked about images before and how we don't use them, but I think this is one of those cases where it's unavoidable and so useful, because you've got, how else could you see exactly which bits to pull out and which screws to do? Even then, there were a couple of things that bothered me that I did let them know, and it's usually whoever's written this has gone through the process several times, that there's a bit that it's so obvious to them, they've just mentally missed it out of their model when it comes to describing it. But otherwise, I thought it was excellent. I didn't go for the upgraded screen. Yeah, Vladimir.
I mean, that guide looks actually pretty good. All I wanted to say that there is a difference between using a guide for some hardware repairs, where you actually open a full like plate of micro elements to navigate through to find the exact connector you need to disconnect, the exact screw you need to unscrew, and so on. So basically, the navigation is a problem. If we have a software which doesn't have a very sophisticated graphical user interface, and just have a simple one or even just a command line interface, it's a different story, basically.
Yeah.
I can share. Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say I can share a piece of documentation that from the Arch Linux stuff that I find really cool. I'm not sure how this is going to work because this is.
I've decided you as a co-host, so it should work.
Oh no, the screen. And so can everybody see this pragmatism, user centrality, versatility?
Yeah.
This is like totally ideological. It's a complete description of why we did this and what we did. But when you read it, the way it reads is very much like somebody sitting on the other side of a kitchen table talking to you. They're basically giving you a manifesto, but it's like, oh, I just went to church because I like eating the communion wafers or whatever. It's very calm and relaxed and straightforward, and the line that always gets me is, whereas many GNU Linux distributions attempt to be more user-friendly, Arch Linux has always been and shall always remain user-centric. And as soon as you get that, the whole page just makes sense. So this is where it's not about the presentation, it's about the actual writing, the thinking and the writing. I don't know how many people wrote this, but you asked for a favorite piece of documentation. This is one of mine.
The Arch Wiki is a great example of good documentation, and remarkable that people have come together to agree on what actually ends up going in there as well, considering it's Arch. A couple of comments. Peter Fowler and Dylan Corner. DigitalOcean is great. DigitalOcean's tutorials are really great. Often the top hits for a lot of things that related to what we do because they're so effective. Jared has said Docusaurus. They use the docs code base as examples throughout the docs. I did test out Docusaurus as a tool chain, and it's beautifully done. It looks great as well. I do like it. Dylan links to a blog post. Framework docs. I've not looked at frameworks docs. Jared says framework docs are good. More talk about videos, the roles of videos in documentation. And I think one thing that keeps coming up is that we don't have the rules for images or for video or for Oxford comma, but we can all think of times when those rules you've got to be adaptable and look at the context of what it is you're trying to work on. Because undoubtedly with the Steam Deck example, that the images needed to be there. I had another good example of something very similar to iFixit. I can't think of it. Can I ask one more question from the document? This is one of Julia's questions, actually. Writer's block. Do you feel intimidated by a blank page, or a brand new topic, or a document that you've got to write? Yeah, Julia, answering your own question.
Yeah, no, I'm not answering, but I think we talked about this in Madrid a little bit, right?
Did we?
It's maybe not so applicable to technical documentation as much as it is for, writing blog posts or fiction or anything like that. But I think some of us also, when we were talking about AI, mentioned that sometimes we also use, well, I haven't, but maybe it could be a good idea, tools like ChatGPT and similar to kind of, break the ice, get some ideas, and then start from there. Because sometimes you really don't know where to start from.
Yeah, I don't so much have writer's block, but sometimes when the problems are so complicated and the stack of software is so complicated, and you know that people just want to say, we just need this documented, you don't know where to start or how to organize all these things into a way that can be documented first. I do really struggle with that. Dan, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was listening to the video last night where you talked about this, and to me it's exciting when there's a new topic to write about. Sometimes I don't know what the feature is or something, but I look at the pull request when the code was merged and get an idea and start writing, and then fill in the blanks with the developer over the next few days. But yeah, I mean, if it's a new cool feature, I'm excited to write about it. So.
Yeah, thanks. Bill, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I kind of use Hemingway's approach. Not that I necessarily like his literature, but he used to start by just typing words with no punctuation, in no particular grammatical order, just typing nouns and verbs and things that came to his mind about the subject. And after he got 3 or 4 paragraphs, he said, then you automatically start organizing it. And before you know it, you've got something you can work with. But he also used the concept of linkage. Once he got started on a topic, he never actually finished. He would cut it off at a certain level and send that to his publisher, but he'd leave the next few paragraphs. And even years later, he'd come back to that. And the last novel he wrote was supposed to be a 10,000 word serial for Harper's Weekly or something. And it ended up being 40,000 words and turning into another novel because he just kept on writing until, he finally said, okay, I'm done with this. I just got to give it. And they gave it to the publisher and they're like, this is marvelous. We're going to publish it. We'll give you money. So, yeah.
I do. Often there have been times where I've been stuck and I have just started writing, and even if the writing's terrible and that isn't what you wanted, at least you've got something then to kind of comment yourself on. I did see that Faith did have their hand up, and I wanted, Faith, if you do want to say something, please do.
Yeah, sure. So I have a document to write or something to write on. I write a list of things or ideas that I have, and the ideas become paragraphs. Then from there, you kind of have something you're working on. Then I'll build on that from time to time, and you have your whole document. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Ruth?
Yeah, for me, I think my strategy is mainly to just not worry about the beginning and just start, and then at the end go back to the beginning and fix that up, because that is the part where I can struggle to just like, okay, how do I start here? What's the best way of wording that? Should I turn that sentence around? And then I can spend 10 minutes on the first sentence, which I'm going to change again at the very end anyway, because then I know what the whole page is about. So my trick there is really to just write down whatever I think, or just start. I think Sally said, yeah, stop starting at the beginning. Just start somewhere and then go back later, because then it's a lot easier to insert the last sentence, or the first sentence, actually.
Yeah. Katana?
Yeah, so my strategy is to just write as if I'm explaining it to myself or somebody who has like absolutely no idea. I imagine I'm explaining it to a 6-year-old or something similar. So I just don't worry about anything else until I have kind of processed it in my mind and have that on paper.
It's really reassuring to know that we all have to face this. It seems like a common problem. Sharon, go for it.
So for me, by now, I have stopped kidding myself that I can just not worry about it and start writing, start typing away. So what I do, I I write first on my notebook. So when I have a few points, or actually by the end of it, I find that I have written the whole thing on the notebook, so I just transfer because I just find it easier to write with my hand than typing. So by now I have like 20 notebooks which are full of these things. But again, it's like a museum of writer's block. So
yeah. Yeah, I think we have talked about this before because I can remember saying that I would just change the scene, go out for a walk or something, and totally think of other things quite differently, and something will pop into my head about an approach or some angle that I can use to start writing on something. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I think. Thanks so much, all of you, for your patience with today's session. Things will be back to normal next week and the following week, where we've got talks on industrial standards and how a technical author copes with writing about industrial standards and the change from writing like that, from writing with an open source and public community. And then after that, in 2 weeks, Julia's going to talk about onboarding at Canonical and how that has been. So thank you all again for turning up. Hopefully see you this time next week, and have a great weekend.